Hi guys, good morning, happy Monday. Today we are going to be doing 9.3, factoring with a greatest common factor. So we're going to be combining 9.1 and 9.2. We will be factoring the same way, but before we begin doing the X factoring technique, we will find the greatest common factor and factor it out. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So our first example, we want to factor completely 2x cubed plus 7x squared minus 15x. So actually, every time you're factoring, the first thing you should look for is a greatest common factor. So on your last worksheet, 9.2, none of those questions had a greatest common factor in them. But that should still be the first step every time you're factoring something, is to look for that greatest common factor. On the worksheet for today, 9.3, there will be some that do have a greatest common factor. There will also be some that do not. But again, if you just start with that step first every time, looking for a greatest common factor, you should be good. All right, so let's go ahead and look at our example here. The numbers 2, 7, and negative 15, they have no common factors. But I notice that each term here has an x. So I'm going to pull one x in front of the parentheses. That's going to leave 2x squared plus 7x minus 15. So basically each of our x's just went down by 1 degree, right, because we pulled it out front. So now we're going to kind of ignore the x out front for a minute. We're not going to forget about it. We still need it there. But we're going to ignore it while we look at what's inside here. And we're going to x factor. So up here, remember, we need a times c. And down here we need b. So a is equal to 2, and c is equal to negative 15. So 2 and negative 15 makes negative 30. And then our b is equal to 7. So that's going to go down here. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to multiply to negative 30 and sum or add up to 7. So for 30, I could have 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. So these are the options. I'm looking for some that will sum to 7, and because my number is negative, I know at least one needs to be negative. So it looks like 3 and 10 are the ones that are going to work, because 10 minus 3 is equal to 7. So I would want the 3 to be negative and the 10 positive, because that would give me the 10 minus 3. So 10 and negative 3. So down here I put x plus 10, and then x minus 3. And then don't forget, I need to divide each of these by our a. So we're going to divide these by 2. Okay. So remember, if that bottom number goes in evenly, we're just going to go ahead and divide it. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. If it doesn't go in evenly, we're just going to bring that 2 in front of the x. So here is the factored form of this polynomial. All right, let's try another one. All right, 3x squared minus 3x minus 30. So again, first step every time, look for a GCF. Again, on this worksheet, some of them will have a GCF, some will not, but you need to start out looking every time to see if they do. So on this one, each term has a 3 in common, so we're going to pull out a 3, which would leave us x squared minus x minus 30. Go ahead and double check with yourself. Make sure if you multiplied that back in that you would get the same thing you had before. All right, so again, the 3 is going to stay out front, but we're going to kind of ignore it for a minute while we x factor what's inside the parentheses. So a is 1, b is negative 1, and c is negative 30. So a times c would be 1 times negative 30. And b is equal to negative 1. So I'm looking for two things that multiply to negative 30 and add to negative 1. So again, I had 1 and 30, but that won't work because 1 plus 30 is 31, 1 minus 30 is 29. 2 and 15 won't work, 3 and 10 won't work, but 5 and 6 will work because they're 1 apart. So I know one of them needs to be negative. I gotta just think about which one. Because my result is a negative 1, I want the bigger number to be negative. So 5 and negative 6. So this would simplify to x plus 5, x minus 6. I would want to divide each of my terms by a, but in this case a is just 1, so it's not going to change anything. So this would be the results. Okay, let's try a third example. Maybe we can advance our slide. Factor completely 20x squared minus 15x. This one looks a little bit different. It has an x squared term, it has an x term, but it doesn't have that constant term. And because of that, factoring out the greatest common factor is actually going to be enough just to finish factoring this. We won't need to x factor. So 20 and negative 15 have a common factor of 5, and x squared and x have a common factor of x. So we'll pull that 5x in the front. 20 divided by 5 is 4, and we pulled 1x, so that would be 4x. Negative 15 divided by 5 is negative 3, and again we pulled that x in front. So in this case, 5x times 4x minus 3, that's our answer. The x's are pulled apart. We have each x in a single factor. So on this one, it's a lot quicker if we don't have that constant term. You can just pull out the common factor and you're done. All right, last example, we have 12x squared minus 46x plus 20. Again, first step, look for that common factor. So 12, 46, and 20 do have a common factor of 2. So I'll just pull a 2 out front. That will leave me with 6x squared minus 23x plus 10. Now, if you ever pull out a factor and then you see that these numbers still have something in common, then you would need to go ahead and pull that out as well and multiply it by the 2. But in this case, 6, negative 23, and 10 do not have another common factor, so I know that 2 was the greatest common factor. All right, so again, we're ignoring the 2 out front. We're just going to factor what's inside the parentheses using x factoring. So A is 6 and C is 10. So we have 60 up here and negative 23 on the bottom. So for 60 to get 23, for 60 we have, let's just list the factors, 1 and 60, 2 times 30, 3 times 20, oh, and there we go, 3 and 20 makes 23. So over here we put our 3 and our 20, but notice our signs are not matching up. We need positive 60, but we also need negative 23 when we add these. So remember, a negative times a negative is a positive, and then negative 3 plus negative 20 is negative 23. So negative 3 and 20 will work. I come down here, x minus 3, x minus 20. All right, so now I just need to make sure I divide these by our a, which was 6. Okay, so 6 does not go evenly into 3, so I would want to move this bottom number over. But before I do that, I've got to take out the common factor between 3 and 6. So I got to reduce that fraction to 1/2. And then over here, our fraction 6 obviously doesn't go evenly into 20 either, so they need to be reduced as well. So 20 and 6 have a common factor of 2, so that would reduce to 10/3. Now we can take those bottom numbers and move them in front of x. And it is okay to have more than one of those. So this would be 2 times 2x minus 1. Just move this 2 in front of this x. And then we need to do the same thing with the 3. So 3x minus 10. All right, so there's our result. All right, guys, so go ahead and try the worksheet. I will put up the key, and you can check your work and then just turn them in as soon as you can. If you have any questions at all, please email me, and then we can set up a time to chat if you need more help in that. All right, guys, have a great day. See you.